had an affair, and the affair was so much medicine for me because I was always the goody two shoes. I have to say the truth. What happens is you pick a man in his feminine, a man who is really afraid, a man that is desperately wanting to be loved. As a result, he not be his true self. The story that we have been programmed with is undeniably the biggest thing causing separation. The men are crying and gagging, and it's just profound. And I think the biggest thing that men don't realize is that they're, and I think the biggest thing that women don't realize is that they're.
I'm wondering, how do people know that they're healed?
When you learn to get really quiet, you start asking yourself, how does that make me feel? It either feels so good it can't be wrong, or it feels so wrong it can't be right. And you really start to listen and ask yourself, why am I with someone that feels so wrong it can't be right? You got to go down the rabbit hole.
What's the Danny Morel perspective on the terms high value men and women? What's the Danny Morel perspective on the terms high value men and women?
Very different than what they're made to mean.
Right.
Yeah, a high value man, for example, is somebody with a lot of money. Somebody, I mean, if you just picture him, he's really successful in business.
Mm-hmm.
A high value woman, she's on Instagram. She's got the bikini body. She has a nice purse. She has the Dior sunglasses and the red bottom shoes, or whatever. And to me, I wouldn't come close to those people with a 10-foot pole, because a truly high value human being doesn't need to show you anything. A truly high value human being knows who they are, and they're perfectly content with who they are on the inside. A truly high value human being is from within. That's what's really high value, is somebody who knows themselves, somebody who has journeyed within themselves, somebody who has removed all of their limiting thoughts, feelings, traumas, energies, somebody that is at peace with themselves, somebody that is spiritually connected. That's a high value man or a high value.
Are you writing a book right now?
I am.
Okay. So you're laying all this out. You're obviously thinking about it a lot. And
Yeah. I am. It's
you sound like you're training for an Ironman. You're like, yeah.
you know what it is, man, is that for some reason the thing, like, it flows like this.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard for it to flow like this. It's just, so it's tougher for me. Yeah.
When is the book due? When is the manuscript supposed to be finished?
6 months ago.
Yeah. You could use the new kid as an excuse, but now
I know. For sure. Yeah. New kid, moving back and forth. Yeah. But we're, in truth, like these last couple of months have been like really, really rough. Like when I met you in London, like I think just today, like last night, I got a nice 7 hours of sleep. I don't think I've in a while. I woke up, I was able to like get a little workout in. I've got the time to get another workout in, or a walk later. Like I feel like I'm in my element again, So I think that's been part of the struggle, quite frankly.
Well, as someone who's lived out of a backpack for the last three years almost, I recognize a capsule wardrobe when I see one. Talk to me a little bit about that. Every time I see you, you got the black shirt, the black pants. Was that a deliberate choice? What does your closet look like, Danny? Is it a bunch of black shirts and black pants?
Black t-shirts, black pants, black sweaters, black tracksuits. Man, because I used to be the opposite guy.
You're the custom-made suit guy.
I was the custom-made suit with the flashiest, most expensive, Zegna tie with the gold Rolex watch. Like I needed you to like me because of what I was wearing.
Mm.
And then you get it, man. It's like, it's true story. By the way, I'm just going to share, if you're out there listening, like, please don't get mad at me. I just want to share my truth. But, the other day I was driving and I was back home. I was driving and I don't like wearing anything branded. I just don't like it. Uh, nothing wrong with it. Again, I just don't like it because of who I was in my past. And anyhow, I'm driving and like the sun, when the sun is in the morning and it's like right in your eyes and it's like blinding you, right? So I like reach into my glove box and to pull out some sunglasses, which normally I just have like these $20 pairs of like my in-laws own a glasses company and I like them. They're cool. But my old Prada sunglasses from back in the day were in there and I'm trying to like sell them on Facebook or I probably just give them away to somebody. And I looked at them and they say Prada. I'm like, I feel like an idiot wearing those things. Like I really do. So I refuse to wear them because that's just where I'm at. And it's funny because on socials, so many people like, look at me and they ask, well, why don't you wear white? Because there's no white pants, like white pants and white. It just feels weird to me. So I just picked black. It just seemed easy. That's it. That's it.
Well, you do rock one logo. You rock the butterfly logo.
Yeah, because that means,
What does that mean to you?
well, my very first ayahuasca ceremony, in true Danny Morel ego fashion, I go up and I take a cup, the first cup, and I lay down. And an hour later, I sit up because I realize like nothing's happening. I don't feel anything. And everybody around me is like, doing their thing, they're throwing up, they're giggling, they're orgasming, whatever they're doing. Right? So I'm like, this stuff, it's not all it's going to be. So the shaman says, all right, if you'd like the second serving, come on up. I was the first one there, the first one at the altar. And, my ego is like, man, this stuff. He goes, how much do you want? Give me whatever. And he's like, okay. First time ever, like, so he gave me like another full cup. Like, I'm telling you, as soon as I sit down, I'm like, oh my God, I better lay down. Right. And then all of a sudden, my arms start moving like this. Right. And then it was like faster and faster. It's so fast, I can't do it right now because it wasn't me doing it. I was out of control. I was not in control. And clear as day, man, like when I went to church, I had always wanted to hear God's voice. And I never did. I never did. And I would pray extra hard. Well, right then and there, I heard God's voice. And she tells me, she says, my son, your life is about to transform just like a butterfly transforms. And I see literally the vision that I get is I see the cocoon opening and I fly out. And that's where my journey began. And so that butterfly logo represents transformation. That means a lot to me.
Hey, so a lot of you all have been reaching out with guest suggestions. Like, you should interview President Obama. You should interview Oprah Winfrey. And look, I'm definitely sending out invitations to people like that all the time. But something that you can do right now to help make it easier for those kinds of guests to say yes to my invitation is to subscribe to my channel. That's why you always hear podcasters like me saying, please subscribe to this channel. I'm just being honest. So if you could just hit the subscribe button right now, that's literally the best way that you can help me get you bigger guests on this show. All right. Thank you so much in advance for that. And back to the show.
You're recognized and to some extent you're celebrated for your ability to hold space for a lot of people to kind of explore their healing journey, through your awakening events and et cetera. And again, I know you didn't just wake up and you have all these skills to be able to hold that space. When you look at your backstory and, the fact that you built these companies in real estate that, again, represented a different aspect of who you were as you were going through your own journey, but those skills can still translate in holding space and inspiring and motivating in thinking in terms of scale and building, and I want to talk a little bit more about how you acquired these skills, right? Because you were in real estate. There are a lot of people, there's a million people in real estate. Why were you the one to start coaching these other realtors? Why were you the one to scale this business to $1 billion? What did you learn from that tortilla delivery company, or, or that first guy that you work with who were screwing people around and they came back and laid into you to
Yeah.
help you sort of find your path in learning the business acumen behind inspiring people?
Yeah, like it's so interesting because this came up last week at Awaken. We just got done with it, and I was talking to them and sharing with them how money, in this case, as is relationship and as is health, just a reflection of what's going on inside. I was telling them a story about when I was in real estate, and this ties in perfectly. And I was sharing with them that I learned how to sell real estate from a group of unlicensed realtors. We're all from Peru, and they had just like, I don't know how they got over here. I don't know if they had a green card or, whatever the case may be. But they would send me to the swap meet, and they would send me to the swap meet to go sit in front of people and talk to them and get numbers and phone numbers, right? Well, they taught me how to work with buyers, because to work with a buyer is pretty easy. You put them in your car, you drive them around, you open the door, you ask them, do you like the house? And then they do, and then you make an offer. That's it. But when you work with a seller, right, it's different, because you got to go interview for the job of getting their house sold, basically, right? And so we'll start from the beginning. I would say 70% of all real estate agents are afraid to work with sellers.
Hmm.
And if you dig deep, why would you have to, when you can go put 20 buyers in your car, open the 20 doors, ask them if they want to buy the house, and if the average price point is, $500,000 in the neighborhood, and you get 3% commission, which is $15,000 times 20 houses, that's 300 grand a year. Like, why would you need to do anything more than that, right? Here's where things were different for me. Whenever, and it's always been like this, whenever I've been afraid of, I want to go discover why I'm afraid of it. I want to go into the depths of it, because that's where like the magic starts to happen, right? And so my motivation was, I remember at the time, I um, I fast forwarded my life, 10 years, and I thought, right now I'm not married, I don't have kids, but when I do have kids, I'm not going to want to be one of those missing dads, because my dad was missing, right? I want to be at their games. I want to be at practices. I want to be able to pick them up. Many people don't know this about me, but when my boys are with me every morning, I wake them up, I make them breakfast, I cook their lunch, I drive them to Timbuktu because we live far away. I'm driving them all around. I come home, I operate my business. My business ends at, 2, so that I can get back in the car. I go back out there. I pick them all up. I come home. I make them some lunch. I make sure that they rest, get them to sports practices. Like, I wanted to have it all in life, I wanted to have the freedom to be able to do that and explore that. Right. And so that's what took me into learning, and that's what took me into the courage to face my fears, and the courage to learn parts of the business that maybe other people, didn't necessarily need to or want to address. And then, like, what happened was that translated into the courage to like lease my first office. That translated into the courage to like hire my first employee. That translated into the courage to like open the brokerage and start recruiting agents. That translated into the courage to hiring a CFO. That translated into the courage to hire somebody to take over operations. Translated into the courage to like expand the business. And next thing you know, we have 400 agents. We're doing $1 billion in annual sales. On top of the 400 agents, 30 employees. Like, it was a monster. It was a monster, And But then that translated into the courage of me listening to my heart to know when it was time for me to leave the industry. And I literally manifested a buyer for my business. I said, by next year I'm done. I had started my healing journey and I said, this just doesn't, this language, this conversation, this energy, quite frankly, the frequency of the industry, not all over the place, but where I sold real estate, there was very little loyalty. There was very little like friendship. And it was like getting your heart broken, even when I wasn't connected to my heart back then, getting your heart broken over and over and over again. And I finally was like, I want to help people, but in truth, like the way that I could really help them is to like really discover who I am first outside of the industry that is very much attached to like competition and financial gain and all of those things. It just didn't resonate with me anymore. And that took a lot of courage because that was my identity, and that's how it all went down.
In the moment in 2008 when you lost everything, the first time you had to get out of the industry and you couldn't even afford to get the air conditioner fixed and you had 2 kids and a wife and it was 103 degrees and all that. Obviously, you had to figure it out, but looking at that part of your life now through the lens of Danny Morel now, what do you think you learned spiritually from that experience of losing everything and then having to rebuild it all again?
Um, fa- I learned facing the darkness. I learned facing yourself. I learned picking yourself back up. And it's interesting you bring that up because yeah, the way this all connects is that now, you know, I'm able to hold space for literally hundreds of people at a time going through their own self-actualization. Uh, because I went through that myself, I went through it
Mhm.
myself. Um, it's even funny because so what we do is after Awaken, right? Which at this last one, there was about 800 people there. After Awaken, I took a 1-day break. And then I went into what we call our inner circle intensive. And inner circle is like my mastermind program per se, right? Anyhow, at the end of the 3 days of the intensive, I told them, I said, listen, I want to let you know. There's a lady that said, if you would have asked me, a month ago if this program was worth it, I honestly would have said no. And I didn't flinch because that's okay. She has the right to, and then she says, but being here, she was like, take all my money because you changed my life. Right. And as I was, I didn't react. I just heard her. But, she mentioned that she was a little upset at the beginning 'cause she didn't get enough of my time per se. Right. And then I grabbed the mic and I said, listen, guys, I want you to know that part of the medicine of this program is knowing that you got into this thing because you thought that the answer was in me.
Mm,
And so you needed me. And part of the medicine in the program is that I recognize that in you. And I understand that you will never, ever find the truth about yourself if you think that the answer is in me. So I have to start the process. There's a whole new crop of you coming in, right? There's like 10 new members. And it's like, and I'm already noticing, like, you have to make sure that I see you. You have to always raise your hands. You always have to ask me for a hug. You always have to, like, do the little things where you don't realize you're trying to get my attention. And the medicine is, I ain't going to give it to you.
mm.
I'm not going to give it to you. Because if I give it to you, that I'm falling into your need, and your need is the very thing that is keeping you from the life that you want. So the medicine is standing firm for your highest self, because your highest self doesn't need me, doesn't need anything or anybody. Your highest, what you need of is less of me and more of you, quite frankly. And all of that, like, I learned because that was me. That was me. I was that guy that needed. And then you get to a space where you no longer need, and it's awesome.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of now was another, again, part of the story in the real estate experience where you talked about how one guy you were working with, you would give him everything, all the resources, and he couldn't make the sales. And then another guy could make the sales. And you said the difference in those two is that one had an option not to do it, gave themselves an option not to do it. The other one had no other options. They had to do it. And I think that also translates on a more spiritual level, like going through those moments, those rock bottom moments where you lose everything and you have to do it is really not only preparing you for a breakthrough, but it's also your credentials for when you really fully step into your purpose and start helping other people to navigate a similar storm to the one that you navigated, because that's how they're going to be able to relate to you. Just being in your energy, you don't have to say a word. They just being there, they know, okay, this person knows knows where I am right now.
That's right.
And even if they're not giving me what I think I need, they're not giving me what I think I want. They're giving me what I need by just holding that space.
You know what's wild, like? Never in my life would have thought that I would be talking about the things that I talk about, doing the things that I do. Never in my life would I think that do you know what it is to have 800 people doing breath work? Like,
No.
it's wild, bro. Wild, right? And because of me and because of you're really helping me to reflect things. Because of me and my drive and my desire to get to the truth and to excel and to be the best, like we don't play around. Like it isn't light per se, right? It is like, we're going to take you in darkness because you're never going to get the light unless you go into the darkness, you know? And so, and sometimes I'm like, we did this activity with all of the women, and I asked, our audience is normally 75% women as it is. So the men at our events are outnumbered like 4-1.
Right.
We do this activity with the women where, for a woman to fully self-actualize, she's got to deal with her sexual trauma. Like she's got to start that process. She's got to get out of that energy that has been holding her back her whole life. And she's got to come face to face with it and start the process of just like, starting to let go. And so we do this activity where, I purposely make the men see, I make them separate, and it's all the women, and all these women are in front of me, brother. And it's like, I'm sitting there like, never in life that I think I'd have, 600 women, like holding their hands, sitting in front of me, and I'm guiding them in something like, what, and, but that's only possible because I was able to deal with my own femininity, my heart, right? Where I was afraid to do it, where I was afraid to come face to face with mourning my mother's death. I was afraid to open up and receive love, and I think in many ways, our society has been so bamboozled because everybody wants to become something, like, call it a life coach or a therapist or, whatever you want to become. This, like, it's one thing to have a certificate on your wall. And I literally do not have a single certificate of a single course. There's nothing. It's the course of life. It's the course of life. And I only speak about the things that I have overcome or become. And that is why purposefully, like, people will ask me all the time, like, why don't you talk about like gay relationships and so forth and so on? And it's like, because I don't know. I don't want to offer you something that I don't really know. So yeah.
Okay. So speaking of that, your mom passed away in 2016, and this was a moment of reckoning for you where you started asking yourself some very tough questions. What I'm curious about is, what was the catalyst for you asking yourself those questions, in the sense that, were you reading a certain book at the time, maybe Conversations with God, or had you watched a Tony Robbins thing and you thought, I need to start asking these kind of questions?
No, what happened was I saw my mom, and for many years, this was the point of a lot of anger for me.
Mm-hmm.
But even this, I had to go through and heal. But I saw my mom basically wither away from cancer, all while she gave her life to the church, you know?
Mhm.
And so I saw my mom believe in something, because that's what she believed, right? And until the
You too, though.
last,
You were a big Christian and
oh, I
and
was in
and
my
upheld a lot of those principles.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. By the time that my mom was sick, though, I was already starting to like, mm, something's not right. I'm not feeling something here because I remember people would like. I'll give you an example. I'd be walking down a neighborhood, and I'd say, "Someday I'm gonna live here." And then like a year later, and it was like the dopest neighborhood in town. I'd be living there. Literally, it would happen just like that, right? And nowadays I have to be careful because true story, like I just built this place, and 3 months ago, before we left to London, I was like, "Hmm, this is where I want to live, right?" And I said, someday. Next thing you know, like we're in escrow buying a house in that neighborhood right now, And that was like 30 days later I came up. So um, the point is to say that people would come up to me because I was, 21, 22, 23 years old, where most people that age are like getting drunk and high at college parties and whatever. I was in business. I was making money. I was driving a 7 Series BMW, back when I was like 22 or something like that. So people would come to me and they'd say, God has blessed you so much. Like you're so blessed, right? And truthfully, this is where like my mind and my heart started to like combat a little bit because my mind was told to believe that it was something outside of me. But my heart was like, wait, you're the one that walked by the neighborhood and said that you would live here. And then I'll like, so something's not right here. So then by the time my mom got sick, it was like we went through this journey of basically like coming face to face. I believe this was part of my soul contract, her soul contract, coming face to face with like Jesus never showed up. He did. I'll talk about that later. He never showed up in that way. And it made me come face to face with like, whoa, like if my mom believed this and she put her life to this basically, and now she's gone. Like, what about my life? Like what is this? Am I really happy? Like I have this big business inside, this big business, but I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm in a relationship that like not fulfilled. I don't even feel like I can be my real self in, like I have this nice car and all these nice clothes, but am I really happy? Like this is deep. And then since I had this associated with the church, it was like, and what is God? Like, what is God? Because like I've been told to believe all this stuff, but I don't want to believe anymore. Because my mom believed, and I saw her like die believing, right? And nobody had any answers to me. So I was like, I want to know. I want to know the truth. That's where everything began, man.
And so you go on this sort of rocky montage spiritual journey where you leave your real estate stuff and you start to take the inner explore the inner world. Just give us a little snapshot of how that went down. How did you know what to try first, what to do first, what to do second? When did you have your first direct experience? Because you got to go through all the charlatans and stuff first to realize who's legit and who's not legit.
I'll tell you what happened. Like, I had an affair. I had an affair, and the affair was so much medicine for me personally because I was always the goody two shoes, right? You know this as a man, like when you're around a group of guys, like guys do what guys do, right? And so we'd go to a trip to Mexico because my buddy was getting married per se.
Mhm.
Like, I was the guy that all of the wives trusted, like that if I was going on the trip, like their husband wasn't going to do anything, right? Which is a lot of pressure for me because I can't control what somebody does, right? But, you know, I just had that kind of vibe because they knew if there was any man on planet Earth that would never do anything, it was me. And sure enough, it was true. However, it wasn't my truth. It was coming from this space of wanting to be seen a certain way.
Mhm.
It was essentially coming from a lie within me, right? And so essentially what started to happen was that started building up inside of me. My disconnection at home and my relationship started building up inside of me. And I had a secret crush on somebody for 3 years. And finally one day it just happened, man. And I had so much conflict inside of me because in one aspect, I felt so much guilt and so much shame and like I felt horrible, man, horrible, horrible. I felt like I had let myself down. I felt like I had let God down. I felt like I had let my children down. I felt like I had let the community down. But then on another side, there was a part of me that was like, but like, this is what you wanted though. This was like your truth, right? And so part of me felt like, I was trapped in this cage all these years and I was finally like let out, you know? And that's when everything truly started to happen. And in truth, like you want to hear something crazy? What led to that and what led to my separation, it's almost as if source was like, you know, your time is done in this relationship. Because some people just get together honestly to bring souls into the world and that's okay. That's okay. I think for a lot of people that might trigger them, but that's okay, right? I was on a trip where my son was about to drown. My son was about to fall into a waterfall and I dove in and saved him. And as I'm pushing backwards, I tumbled down the waterfall and I thought I was going to die basically. Right. And when I finally came up for air, I didn't even have any, because you know, when you're fighting that thing, it takes everything out of you. I didn't even have the energy to swim and I was going to keep going down basically. But, um, but luckily, like I had the energy to swim. I got out and my wedding ring had disappeared. And from that moment, it's as if Mother Earth said, like, this is over now. That's when that's when everything started to like fall apart. So yeah, that's what happened. And when I did that and feeling the ugliness of all of that, um, I was the guy that spent 10 years of my life saying ayahuasca is the devil, it's evil, it's like you're a sinner, you do ayahuasca. The Bible says, and I was that guy. And as passionate as I am now, that I was 10 times more passionate back then, quite frankly, you know. And I was at my lowest of my lowest of my low. I had left our home. I left my wife, my ex-wife, and my kids there, and I moved into an apartment. And I was just alone. And I said, I need something because I'm going nowhere, and I'm going there like fast. And then that's when I saw a buddy had done an ayahuasca journey, and he had a massive smile on his face. And I called him and I said, why were you smiling like that? He goes, I did ayahuasca. And something inside of me said, I'm in. That's it. It just kind of called me. And I just kind of went from there.
What's interesting, man, is that when you describe what you were feeling inside, I'm sure on the surface, people thought, "Oh, Danny's the most successful person I know. Did you hear he grew his business to $1 billion and he's done this and he's done that. He's been recognized by this group and that thing." And I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. Like you've been able to do fairly well in the capitalist game,
Yeah.
but in the self-realization game, you're struggling.
I was a
And
mess. I was a mess. Yeah. And you know why, Light? I now teach from this. It because a lot of people make a lot of money, but it's because they're coming from negative energy. It's the whole David Hawkins speaks about this power versus force. Like you can come from force. You can come from the frequencies of desire or pride. And you can get a lot done and you can make a lot of money in this world, but you'll always be miserable inside because it's not really who you are. And as you know, as your soul starts to go through the process of letting go, and you raise into higher frequencies, it's really beautiful, man, because you no longer like want money. You want to help the world. And in the helping of the world, like whatever you need just kind of shows up, you know?
I was watching this random nature video on YouTube or something, or maybe of social media, and this crab was shedding its outer layer. And apparently this is something that crab and a lot of reptiles do this, but what was that process like for you of officially sort of, I guess, recognizing that you have a calling to help other people heal themselves? Was there a ceremony or a ritual around this? Did you make a very conscious decision to do this, or did you just end up somewhere helping people and then you just started making it bigger and bigger and bigger? Like, how did that transition
Oh,
happen?
I'm laughing because this is just me. This is just me. But everything starts with ego. Everything was like, oh man, I'm gonna be the world's greatest spiritual healer, and everybody's gonna want to come, and oh my God, this is gonna be great, and so forth and so on. And then I remembered the moment, man, like true story. It was during COVID, and we had not held see, Awaken used to be called Relentless.
Okay.
And Relentless was like a motivation type thing. And that's where we had like, Kobe Bryant, Alex Rodriguez, all of these like famous people would come and speak. But then when Kobe passed like 6 months after my last Relentless, and that's when I was like, something just didn't feel right anymore. Like, and by then I had done plant medicine. So I was like, when you really find yourself, there's nothing to be relentless about because everything you ever wanted, you have in here, you know? And so it's like, man, I gotta call it something else, I gotta call it something else. I said, I know, like I went through a pretty big awakening and I feel like I awakened. And that's where the name Awaken Your Highest Self came from, right? Well, the very first Awaken Your Highest Self was with 30 people in my living room. And we like broadcasted it to a couple of other people online. And I remember, man, one of the biggest ego deaths and one of the scariest moments I have ever had because I thought I was going to literally die. Because I'm sure you've had an ego death. Like that's some gnarly stuff, right? Especially the first couple times you're experiencing it. After that, you're like, okay, you can just breathe through it or whatever. But I'm sitting up there and I'm so scared. Like, I'm so scared because my whole ego was attached to like you needing me and you like paying me for that need, which ties back into what I was talking about earlier. Cause now I can spot that need in somebody else. Cause like I said, I was living in that frequency as well. And everything is boiling up inside of myself. I'm starting to sweat because I know I have to say the truth. I have to say the truth. And I'm sitting there in front of all these people. And I'm like, if I say this truth, everything I know is gone. Everything I know is gone. And everything that I know to be is over. But I'm like, you have to say it. And then I go, and the truth guys, like, you don't even need me. Like when you find yourself, you don't even need me because you would have found the truth. And the truth is that everything you've ever wanted is inside. And I said, guys, I'm going to land early. I'm not feeling that good. I got to go. And I like stumbled to my bedroom because it was in my house. Luckily, 3 of the women who had done medicine before sat next to me. Like I was there for an hour, shaking and twitching and like throwing up and this energy, this lifelong need for people to accept and validate and respect and maybe even in some ways feel less than like, just all the bullshit, quite frankly. It just all started coming out of me. All of it
Mm,
started me. And in truth, if I would not have had the courage to say what I said, because I think that's the part that I think most people don't understand in this spiritual journey. Like I've seen people do ayahuasca. I'm not kidding you, 60 times. They still don't get it. They still don't get it because they don't ever actually listen to the message and they don't actually live it out. Like I'm thinking vividly, like I know, not every couple has to break up. Obviously, a lot of couples, the medicine heals their relationship, and it's more beautiful than ever. But I know one guy in particular who like, it's very clear that like him and his wife are just not in love. And him and his wife, they live separate lives. And he's out at strip bars and all these places and like partying with prostitutes and all. This is after doing ayahuasca at least 12, 15 times, by the way. It's just like he still doesn't get it because the medicine is telling him what he has to do, but he's so attached to the image, right, that he won't let go. And that's what I think some people do. And so in truth, like I was just that guy that was not afraid. Like you get to the space where it's like you don't care what people think. You want to know the truth about yourself. And I think that's what helped me get to where I am today.
Mhm. You got a massive platform. You got a huge social media following. I heard in another interview you talked about in order to get traction, and I may be not saying it in the right way, but um, you want to connect with. You said most people are unconscious, basically, and you want to meet them where they are.
Mhm.
In terms of your own messaging.
Mm.
Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more and what you meant by like?
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting. Like even the masculine feminine thing,
Mhm,
like that's not really who we are. That's not really what we do. It's just people are in so much conflict. They're used to living in conflict. They're used to living at war. They're at war with themselves. They're at war with their partner. They're at war with life itself. So where before you used to have to kind of meet, they're at war with money and their inability to have money. Everybody's at war, which is why we're at war.
mhm.
War is just a
It's an
mirror.
out picturing of what's happening internally.
That's it as a collective. And so it's kind of like you have to feed them. You have to feed them right where they are, right? And so it's interesting because like all my social media guys, I see saying, I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't want to talk about this stuff. Like I want to help heal people. And they're like, you don't get it. People don't want to hear that. Like people don't want to hear that, they're still holding on to the letdown that they felt from their father. Because that's not sexy. That's not
Mhm,
you got to do is you got to give them like this other message, right? Because in truth, like what we're, I think, really good at is that we use the unconscious to help us spike our content to get to the masses. So it's like when people start arguing and debating and getting upset and so forth and so on, we're just like, they don't realize they're unconscious of the fact that the very thing that they don't like because they're feeding it and giving it energy is what makes it grow. So I don't take any of it personal. Like, you know, I think I posted a video today, something along the lines of, if you're a woman and you're in your masculine energy, right? Which call it what you want. If you're living in the woundedness of your mind, if you're living in fear, if you're disconnected from your heart. But I use masculine energy because like half of the people are like, well, why does it have to be a gender? So they get mad and they comment. No problem. Then you're gonna pick a partner who most likely is in their feminine energy because of polarity. It's just like, don't get mad. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. You ain't gonna get anybody who's in their healthy masculine energy. You won't unless you're willing to have like a couple hundred ego deaths right there. Like that man alone will be medicine for you, quite frankly. But most likely, what happens is you pick a man in his feminine. A man who's really afraid to step into the leadership and to confront you, a man that is desperately wanting to be loved. And so as a result of him desperately wanting to be loved, um, he will not be his true self because he's
mhm,
afraid of himself. And so I said, so you do that to get what you need, and then he does that to get what he needs. The problem is that won't last. That'll last 4 or 5 years. And eventually a woman will lose respect over a man like that. And then, life happens. And so that's an example of like one of the videos that we post and one of and it's really interesting to see the comments because it's like a lot of people are like, oh my God, you just described my life, you
mhm.
know? And then there's a lot of people who are like, but no, I don't, they just, and then people just start talking and then it just kind of does what it does. you know?
I think aside from religion and politics, I think the relationship content is probably the most engaging and the most triggering for a lot of people. Um, because everybody has an opinion, and to some extent, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't. I think because everyone's experience is so subjective, even if you're a quote relationship expert, you're still going through it to some extent.
I'm not
Yes.
in any way, shape, or form, by the way.
Right. Um, but anyway, your mission, as you've stated, is to have an impact on 3.5 billion people. I don't know why you limit it to just that many when there's more than that in the world. But
I'll tell you why, because they'll take care of the rest.
right, right. But what would you? How would you articulate your overarching message? What is Danny Morel bringing to that relationship or the spiritual conversation that we should all be aware of?
Just a guide to help people reconnect with their hearts
Mhm.
in a profound, deep way. Um, a guide that will help you, peel back the layers of the onion, so that you can experience the richness and fullness of life in your finances, in your health, in your relationships. And a guy that like holds space for you while you're doing it all.
Okay, so connecting with the heart. What are a couple things that we're doing wrong when or we're not? What blind spots have you noticed that a lot of people have when it comes to connecting with their heart? People who think they're doing a great job. People who
Yeah.
think they're spiritual and connected and all the things.
Yeah, I'll tell you the thing that surprised me the most. I don't want to give it all away, but on the final
Sure.
day, we do this activity. We do an activity to help. It starts off by helping women to heal from their sexual trauma. And I'm talking women are gagging, like crying, like it's just like they're just releasing and releasing and releasing. And it's a beautiful thing to watch, right? But then the love you give is the love you receive. So the men participate in that in a very gentle way.
Mhm.
Then we do the reverse. So the women give back to the men. And the men are crying and gagging and it's just profound. And I think and I think the biggest thing that men don't realize is they're disconnected from their ability to receive. And I think the biggest thing that women don't realize is that they're disconnected from their ability to give. They give to their children, they give to their dog, they give to their community, but they won't give to men because they're afraid. They're afraid to fully let go, and they're afraid to fully acknowledge the masculine. And whenever a woman is afraid to fully acknowledge the masculine, it isn't even about the men. She's afraid to acknowledge, forgive the masculine within herself. And when a man is not able to receive, um, it's, it's not even about the woman. It's he disconnected from his feminine and the love that is within him. So after both of those things are done, I saw both parties struggle. I saw women struggle and literally be confused and not know how to give to men. And then I saw men not want to receive from women. And then after a while, they just like drop into their hearts and then like they go, she's beautiful to watch. It's like a reunion, basically. I think that's the biggest thing is that when you're disconnected from your own masculine and feminine, um, it's going to be really rough to like receive or give love to another person.
I've been operating under the I guess one of my theories about I'm not a relationship expert, or anything close to that, but let's say that someone considers themselves to be healed, right? whatever aspect they had too much of this or not enough of that, and now they're sort of healed, yet they keep attracting someone who is closed off in one of those areas, right? It could be any in man, woman, masculine, feminine, etc. Which to me indicates that maybe you weren't as healed as you thought you were.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, how do people know that they're healed? And what are some of the indicators of that? And obviously coming to the awakened experience is, the top shelf solution, but what's something that people can do now from wherever they are to
Yeah.
start facilitating this process?
I would say just look at life. Just look at life. So really look at your relationship with your partner, right? And if there is no partner, really look at your relationship with yourself.
Mhm.
And when I say really look at your relationship with yourself, what I mean is like go deep. Like, what do you need? Do you need attention? Do you need validation? Do you need to be the one that is? Do you need? Do you need glamour? Do you need the labels? Do you need the vape? Do you need the alcohol? Or do you need the Botox? Do you need the lipo? Do you need testosterone? Do you need the steroids? Like, what do you need? And why do you need it? Because I'll tell you, I don't, forgive me for being so blunt. I don't care what anybody tells you. You for sure as hell are not as healed as you think you are if you're constantly in a space where, look at your career. Heck, look at your Instagram profile. Just look there and just ask yourself, what does this person need? An Instagram profile will tell you everything you need to know about somebody. Quite frankly, Um, and look at your career. Look at what you put up with. Look at what you truly enjoy, and have you given yourself the space and the opportunity to enjoy it lately? So I think those are the things you have to really ask to really find out, because you cannot be at the highest energetic frequency and not attract exactly what you want in life in any area of life. It's impossible, because what the outside is just a reflection of the inside.
Mhm.
So the second thing would be, if you were to ask, like, what do we do? I mean, I literally, before coming here, I walked out into the backyard and I took my shoes off and I stepped in Mother Earth. It's as simple as that. Like, reconnect. We're so disconnected as human beings. So just like go sit in silence. Yeah, I wish I could show you right here in the front. There's like this limestone, these trees, and it's like it's just calling. It's literally calling me to like quiet the mind, go sit down, go meditate, right? While you're grounded, and go reconnect, you know? And then the other thing, Light, is go get clear. Like, go get specifically clear with what it is that you want. I think a lot of people are afraid to be that clear because they're afraid to be let down, you know? And so when you're afraid to be let down, there's still some residue of fear in you. Because when you're not afraid to be let down, when you're unattached of the outcome, you just get crystal clear with what you want. And if you don't get it, you just wait till you get it. And that's powerful. And then as a result of being crystal clear, you could spot it out. You know the energy of, like, in this case, the person you're with, if that is the right frequency, that's the right energy of the type of person that you want to be with or not. So yeah, that's my answer.
I think another challenge that we have in our modern society is we don't live in tribes anymore. We don't really live in community. Like, to your point, we're isolated. So we don't have those examples of what life looks like in different stages. We only know what we know and what our friends know. So our peers who are giving us feedback and advice may not be the best or most qualified people to do this. And but again, like to your own example, you said your grandfather, he kind of had a little philandering thing happening, and maybe he wouldn't think that's such a big deal going out and being unfaithful to your wife. I don't know. So how do you think about that? How do you think about who would be the best person to seek feedback from so that you could have some assistance in seeing your own blind spots in your immediate life or community, and how should that conversation start to get the best information back?
I think it's yourself, man. I think it's yourself. I think, as you know, when you learn to get really quiet,
Mhm.
you start asking yourself, okay, like, how does that make me feel? It's either it either feels so good it can't be wrong, or it feels so wrong it can't be right.
Mm.
And you really start to listen. And then you start to ask yourself, why am I doing something, or why am I being with someone that feels so wrong it can't be right? What's underneath there? Where is the lack of courage? Where is the lack of connection to the truth of who I am? What's up with that? Where did I learn that? Like you got to go down the rabbit hole. And then listen, I've been really gentle about this subject, but the truth is that for a lot of people, you can start right with your belief about who or what God is. Because think about this, it's like you can't even have an avocado tree without a masculine and a feminine. But yet here we are, we believe that like God is a man, right? So then as a man, what does that say to me? It says that the woman is even slightly less than me.
Mhm.
And then as a woman, what does that say to me? It means that God is not me, it's something else. It's like different than me. So there's a gap. You understand what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest, not I think, if I step into my boldness, that is undeniably the biggest thing causing separation, first and foremost, is the story that we have been programmed with about who and what God is. Because when you really know the truth, you could never, you can't even put that into a box with a name. Forget about a gender. You just couldn't do that.
Mhm. From what I could gather from reading your first book, is that you grew up in New York City. Your parents, mom is from Ecuador, dad is from Dominican Republic. You had a very seemingly traditional Latin upbringing where you were introduced to salsa and all this really cool stuff. Um, but I would also imagine that you were introduced to the idea that the man is the head of the household. Your job is to provide, and et cetera, et cetera. So can you just talk a little bit about that indoctrination of what you learned from your parents growing up as a young person, the oldest of three boys, in terms of um, what your role was to be in the world, and what the idea of success was to be for you.
Yeah, wow, that's a great one. It's interesting because as you asked me that, when you said the words, the man is the head of the household, I didn't even think about my dad. I thought about my grandfather.
Hmm.
And neither my grandfather nor my dad made any real I mean, they just kind of just got by, financially at least. But there was this reverence, or this huge respect for my grandfather. He was the kind of guy that like sat in the same seat at the dinner table. No one else, absolutely no one else. I don't care if you were a baby. I don't care who you were, could sit in that chair. There was fear. There was fear, um, attached to that, quite frankly. Um, and so whenever I learned, I just kind of learned from watching him. Because if I'm honest, my father is like the exact opposite of, like the exact opposite. Like if you were to see him in the street, you'd be like, "That's your dad?" And he just thinks differently. He acts differently. In many ways, a lot of my motivation for becoming who I am today came from seeing what is the opposite of who I am today, quite frankly. And then secondary, like when I was 13 and my parents, split, I instantly stopped being a kid at that moment. And it's wild because I have a 14-year-old, and I see him and I think like, oh my God, that was the year that I was driving. That was the year that I was taking my little brother to all his sports games and all his practices. So I just became very responsible, quite frankly. And so yeah, I think the other indoctrination that I wasn't too happy with was, especially as a Latino man, it's like there was this undertone. There's like secret knowledge that like, my grandfather went out and like, kind of basically slept with everybody. And I think it's 13 aunts and uncles from probably 7 or 8 different women. Um, and I remember not really liking that. I remember, like to some of my cousins, it was like, man, that's freaking awesome. Abuelito got the chicks or whatever. But I always kind of like saw the pain in that. And
Hmm.
I saw my grandmother's pain, and I kind of really resonated with it. And so, yeah, that's how it all came to be. So if I'm honest, man, like everything that I am today came not only from my deep journey within, but quite frankly, I think from anger and from being mad and from being mad at not showing or not being shown what it is to be a man. Quite frankly, I had to kind of figure it out on my own and mess up a lot of the way.
You mentioned in your book, at least, that you also were exposed to big thinking, and I'm curious how that showed up as a young person. Who did you notice that was thinking big around you, and or influenced you or inspired you to think that way?
You know, um, I had an aunt at the time that we were all a pretty poor family, but she started a Mexican food cart business. So if you think of New York City, you think of like the hot dog guys, and
Sure.
they're at that certain corner every single day type of deal, right? We had, or my aunt had, a Mexican food cart, but we're not Mexican, by the way. So my grandmother would cook like her famous Ecuadorian chicken, and it was
Mhm.
like this chicken with onions and, I remember, and these refried beans. And I remember we'd scoop, I have to show you this. I haven't done this in a long time. I remember we would literally scoop the beans and put them in the tortilla. And then we would like grab the chicken and put it in there and make these big, delicious burritos. I could see them and taste them right now. And we would stand right in like uptown on the east side where people with the most money had. And I had to like help push the little cart for like 20 blocks until we got there. So I think I learned it from her, quite frankly, because she was the only one at the time who had the courage to like buy a house. And I learned a lot from her. Um, I did, however, have a lot of like, big thinking from, seminars and books that I read in my like 18, 19s and 20s. And that's where I started to realize you legitimately can have and become whatever you want.
Is she the one that gave you the idea to have the tortilla delivery service?
No, no, that kind of just came to me. Um, being that I was so responsible, I think, honest to God, I think I was 18 at the time. And I used to take my little brother Anthony to all of his baseball games. So this father that was there saw me. He must have thought like, wow, this kid is like legit, because I was the one showing up to everything even every parent teacher conference meeting, everything. And one summer he decides to go away to Mexico, and he asks me, do you want to take over my route for me while I'm in Mexico and house sit for me? And if you're willing to do that, then I'll pay you. I'll pay you, I think it was like, you can keep all of the profit, but just leave me 20% of whatever is left over. So I started making, like, I don't know the exact the number, because what I think of as a lot of money now has changed, obviously, since I was 19. But I just remember at 18 years old feeling it must have been $1,000 a week.
Mhm.
So for 18, living in the
You were
ghetto,
wealthy.
you're rich. You're rich. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how that happened.
Mhm. And this is in LA, right?
It's in the Inland Empire,
Right.
which is 45 minutes southeast of LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question about your childhood. In the book, you mentioned your parents got divorced at 13, but and you don't really talk about your dad anymore. You do talk about your mom, and so was your dad completely out of the picture, or because you guys were living in the hood, there was all this violence. Like, was he not supporting you guys at all, or what was going on there?
Yeah, no, it's funny. That's why when we were on the podcast together, I mentioned, that book was like that. I wrote that from a different me, like legitimately a different me. And at that time, I hadn't healed my relationship with my father yet. I hadn't reconciled with him, yet. So yeah, he was completely out of the picture. I mean, like, if I'm honest, in many ways, he's still completely out of the picture, but at least we've healed. Every
Yeah.
once in a while we talk, type of deal. Like, in truth, I don't know what it feels like to have some sort of loving human of me to go to. You know what I mean by that? Like, to go to for advice, to go to for help, to go to for pretty much anything, quite frankly. And so it's interesting because that comes up in my relationship with Jen, where, all she really wants is to be there for me and to love me. And there's been a lot of healing around,
Mhm.
it's been a lot of healing around me accepting love from somebody else, because for so long I've just had to fend for myself. And, and, and there's a big part of me that likes that, right? Because it creates something in you. But then there's a big part of me that, like, I probably never listened to, that doesn't like that too much,
Mhm. Well, it also informs I think a lot of your perspective today with the masculine and feminine work, because you obviously saw your mom have to jump into that role a little bit, and then you had your own roles with basically nurturing your brothers, right? And so I think it's important for people to understand that you didn't just wake up one day and have these thoughts, and understand that the way we show up in relationship is largely based on the way we relate to our parents. And then also something you said, which is I healed that part of myself with my father, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that person has to be in your life. And I think that's another
Yeah.
um, aha for people to understand that you don't have to bring people back into your life just because you've healed that relationship with them. It can look like a lot of different things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the most important thing, and it's one of the things, it's like all of Awaken, I culminated into that moment.
Mhm.
Very different to self actualize if we haven't healed our relationship with our mother and father and reconnected with all of our ancestors.
Mhm.
And so that's the last thing we do at Awaken. And Light, I only learned that because that's what happened to me. So I went through a 2-year period where spirit was calling me and was saying, you're never going to be the man you're intended to be unless you take care of this. And I was, I don't want to. He doesn't deserve it. He hurt me. He left me and my brothers, all of these things. And then finally, it's like, little by little, the more that my heart opened, the more and more that I realized that he only did what was done to him, you know.
Right.
And yeah, and then to your point, like, it's just not, I don't know if the word safe is the right word. I don't want to say it's not safe to be around my dad, but it's, he doesn't know how to not let me down.
Mm-hmm.
So since he doesn't know how to not let me down, since he is not in the fullness of, put the word masculine aside for a second, in the fullness of his courage, in the
Mm-hmm.
fullness of himself, in the fullness of his heart, in the fullness of his being, um, he doesn't know how to be there for me in that aspect. He doesn't know how to be that for me. And so, as a result, I tend to create a healthy space and create a healthy boundary. I actually provide for him financially as well now. I take care of him, but I just keep things where they need to be kept per se.
Beautiful, man. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. You have your events, the Awaken events. You have your podcast, which I was honored to be featured on, the Higher Self. When is the next event? Like, how can people learn with you? Is it online? Is it mostly live? What's the
Yeah,
format?
yeah. Awaken is something that we reserve as a live experience. It's
Mhm.
too profound. It's too profound to have online. We are hosting an online event called Discover potentially in January, but the next Awaken is in New York City in February, and then after that will be in April in London, and then after that will be back here in the U.S. in June. So yeah,
Okay. And Discovers for anyone, anywhere in the world. When
yeah,
and
yeah.
nice.
Anywhere. That's right.
Beautiful, man. Well, it's an honor talking to you and hearing more about your story. You shared things I haven't heard anywhere else or I haven't read anywhere else. So I always appreciate that. And looking forward to crossing paths again soon.
I was just telling Jen that we have to go to Mexico City. So when I'm
Yeah.
there,
Yeah. Do
yeah,
your sons speak Spanish?
no, no,
No?
no. They're like learning right now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. Yeah. Well, definitely if you ever make your way to Mexico City, you have to look me up and we'll cross paths.
sure, man. Sure. Thanks so much. This was wonderful. Seriously. We got into some stuff that, like you said, I hadn't gotten into before. So thank you.
Absolutely.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. Click this thumbnail right here, and I'll see you over there.